Welcome to the Week in Italian Startup, where we discuss the latest highlights happening in the Italian tech and investment ecosystem. As we were pointing out the scarcity of investments in AI, things started to move last week, Nick. So we had a little episode with a commentary on how AI was slowing, or apparently slowing. Then this week is kind of the change of pace that we kind of called and we wanted. So that's I thought it was cool.
Yeah, Jack. The government was listening.
I agree.
They heard us very well, and they decided to move. To make
They
it
took
move.
our recommendation. We are
Yeah.
becoming very powerful. I'm very, very proud of us.
Yeah, you know the hidden powers. So that's us. Here we are.
Exactly. All right, so let's talk about the Italian AI Fund, which was announced back in May 2023, claiming of a strategy of about like 600 million deployed overall for basically the next years. What is interesting is that the fund will begin with 200 million from the government, and it will be managed by CDP Venture Capital SGR. And of course, the aim is to expand the strategy, support AI all across Italy. What I thought particularly interesting in this case was the strategy of the fund, and there are a few points that I think are worth mentioning. And then I'm very curious, Nick, what you think about that. So starting from a few points, okay, so the first thing to know, I think, is that basically this AI strategy comes from a fully developed strategic program for artificial intelligence that basically outlined 24 steps for Italy on how exactly to handle AI in general, both in education, public administration, and so on. And it's a plan that basically started in 2022 up to 2024. So this was an interesting element. Obviously, it's ever evolving, it's changing. AI is like the quickest vertical that we've seen, and so on. I guess there are a lot of adjustments to be made. So another point is that this is classified as a CVC fund in a few articles. So I'm curious on how exactly they think about it. So interesting in the fact that they want to deploy, but calling it a CVC, it's cool. What is your take on that, Nick?
Well, so it's complicated. I mean, the Italian government. I am under the impression the Italian government wants to, in a sense, tell the world that they're investing in AI, but with the money of someone else. So if you go and read the article and look at the press releases, so the government is actually moving less than 100 million euros. There's the cybersecurity agency that's putting down 40 million something, and there are 45 million from someone else from the government. CDP itself is expected to move some of the capital, and then the rest is from the private sector. So basically, they're trying to get this fund moving by leveraging a lot of private investment. That's something that CDP has been doing for quite a while. They have some of the vertical funds are actually structured this way. So at least half of the capital from CDP and the government, and the other half from the industry. So in a sense, probably labeling it a CVC fund is a way to make it more palatable to corporates, because basically they're telling them, this is a fund that will be managed according to your strategic needs, in a sense. So you're not just a capital provider, but you can expect some kind of value, getting back some more value other than financial return, hopefully, from this fund. So it's a way to position this fund in a very specific way, and probably it's related to starting to talk to potential limited partners in the fund.
So the full commitment is 200 million really, but to get to 600 is basically by leveraging co-investors. So actually it's kind of a blend, and I thought it was an interesting part of the strategic aspect, which was worth mentioning. And it definitely tells us a lot about sort of the push that they want to give, not only publicly but also through the private sector. So I agree with you. They're making it as accessible and as easily understandable as possible, probably. So that's a good point. Another element which obviously characterize a lot of CDP strategies is really that they're investing across the different players in the VC space. So not only startups directly purchasing shares, but also they're going to invest in funds, they're going to invest in accelerators and incubators. So it's really a 360 sort of strategy covering the overall startup ecosystem in Italy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm happy there is additional funding for this vertical. Somehow it feels like they are reinventing the wheel again, because CDP has already some up and running funds that are specific to this vertical. So launching accelerators, sustaining early stage investments, investing in other funds, so being a fund of fund investments. So again, I'm very happy that there are more resources available. But kind of, I mean, I hope they decide to fit in the existing buckets and not inventing one more buckets with another new mandate, fragmenting the outcome in a sense, right? So I mean, the latest AI investment out of Europe was the one of the company that moved back to France. They raised like more than 100 million out of nothing. Then we had Mistral AI a few months back, and it was hundreds of millions raised by that single startup. So I mean, fragmenting resources across a million different startups will not take us anywhere in AI in particular.
I agree.
I mean, I'm very happy on the side. I hope they will not try to get another, take another acceleration seed stage approach, fragmenting all the resources around across the spectrum.
Yeah.
And here we are again without the firepower to build real infrastructure, real products. We'll see.
And probably the problem is also the fact that it's kind of early to define buckets in AI. It's such a wide and fast-moving vertical. So yeah, doing managing an accelerator for AI and then a fund, and then this one is also focusing on the integration of AI with public administration. So it's another bucket. But do we really need that for effective deployment in the AI VC space?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I really.
I don't know. And investing to deploy AI in the public sector, I mean, the verb is invest, but are we sure that they're meaning capital investments, so investments in equity, or are just investments in product, services, processes, consulting? That we need that, but that's a capitalized expense. Not an equity investment. I don't know. Well, we'll see. I mean, again, I don't want to be too negative about it, but I'm really looking forward to the practical deployment of the fund, and I hope that the good managers at CDP will manage to give a more structure and clear direction to the funds. I mean, CDP VC has a clear mandate. I doubt they will, go too much out of their mandate. But again, we are missing the head of CDP VC, so we don't know
Exactly
who's going to drive the car in the next few years. So that will be important for all of this.
I thought there are also two other points which are particularly interesting. One is very interesting, and one is worth thinking about. So the first one being the fact that actually company invested through this fund will actually have received support to access to public funding. So this is an extra little step that can support actually new companies to access new capital from the government. And that's cool. That's cool. It's definitely helps the flow of money. On the other side, which something to think about is that apparently there is a deep involvement of the National Cybersecurity Agency in the managing of the fund. So that kind of stood out a little bit to me because, it's really interesting to see how exactly the government is taking it. And I think it's worth thinking because it's taking obviously the right precaution, I would say, in terms of not knowing yet all the branches out and second order consequence of AI applied to across the sector. That's a way to sort of screen and have an extra check, I would say. Is it good or bad? We will see.
No, I mean, that's a very good point. I mean, if they're thinking about it in terms of, the fundamental problems with AI, I mean, related to fairness, security, fair use of data, stuff like that, that's an interesting choice. From the point, if you are, working on it on a foundational level, though, because if you're working on it on a operational level, I mean, that's all done. It's just a piece of software like many others. You cannot do much at the policy level if you're just, using the technology, not developing the technology. So I mean, I'm curious. So in a sense, it's an interesting choice in the positive sense. In the other sense, it feels like an overload of the cybersecurity agency, overload of their duties, their original duties. So again, I don't know. I mean, I've got contrasted opinions about it, as you can see. I'm a bit afraid of overloading the mandate of specific agencies to do stuff beyond their area of expertise. I mean, you've got a hammer, so everything will look like a nail, right? So I don't.
Good point.
We'll see.
Awesome. So let's switch gear talking about what is actually happening in companies in AI. So Focoos AI optimize AI optimization startup raising 350K from CDP, Obloo, and Galaxia. So I thought it was cool that you mentioned it because it's kind of a very interesting story on how essentially we have like a university-born company receiving money and then sort of moving down the streamline. So what we always call technology transfer in general in Italy, which is a big theme, especially in Italy. Maybe it's called different in other countries, but definitely Italian investors are very sensitive to this theme. So this is interesting because Focoos was born in Polytechnic of Turin. And basically what they're doing, they're streamlining neural networks for diverse hardware application. With the particular application in aerospace. So a very, very interesting application of AI. And there are two elements which are interesting. One is the kind of investor that are pushing the company from the university origin upward. And then the second one, which I wanted to mention maybe later, is the fact that we are starting seeing what we were discussing before, which is the specialization of AI applications, both for hardware and models. So I think those are the two interesting points here. So maybe starting from the first. In terms of investor, I think three interesting players are at place. Of course, CDP took as a primary interesting player. Obloo is pretty interesting too because they're basically helping bridging the gap between university and early stage funding. So it's a company that provides not only advisory to startup but also to investors and corporates, and they're doing like they're having a very deep focus on deep tech in particular. So it's a very narrow sort of specialized service provider in the VC space. Very, very interesting. They are investing through a fund, which I think is about 40 million, and that fund is specifically backed by the European Investment Fund and of course CDP. So very interesting dynamic, very interesting push from the university upwards. So that's a good example, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree. It was the only deal announced last week. So still late summer, LA summer week, quite sleepy in a sense, but interesting in terms of vertical. Again, remember that Italy is a strong country in terms of the entire value chain in the space industry. So Focoos has the opportunity to get in touch with its natural customers in the aerospace industry. So I think they can do good and interesting things. So very nice. Tiny operation, 35,000 euros.
Yeah.
But best of luck to the team going forward.
And
I was taking a look at the.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, but go ahead.
No, I was also thinking about the first sort of like specialization of the deal, which is aerospace. and then like AI models, which essentially are crafted around specific hardware and specific like applications. So it's very the customization of AI coming, and maybe this is like one of the first signs that we're seeing. I mean, aerospace has been like very active in the Italian ecosystem in general, and the cross between AI and aerospace is probably like a high potential sector right now.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, we know with the space fund, we are covering that vertical. We made an investment in AI in space for autonomous missions, so that's something quite hot, I have to say. So good timing.
Awesome. All right, talking about e-commerce. So e-commerce has gained popularity since forever, essentially, since the internet like was born, and then from there onward, like more and more people are getting like easy access to e-commerce platform, and all the dropshipping sort of like mechanism have been in place. And what we've seen is a lot of like interesting companies that are essentially simplifying the e-commerce procedure. So it's just beyond. I mean, we're going beyond like the simple platform up to sourcing, up to advertising, and a sort of the fact of going toward maybe a one-stop shop e-commerce platform, which is like immediately accessible to everyone to make money online. So I think that seems like to be the final goal. And on this comment, a very interesting dropshipping platform, Yakkyo, Italian, basically it's considering an IPO. The platform had a revenue equal to about 6.5 million in 2022 with 15.2% EBITDA margin. They focus on sourcing and shipping product from China, and especially like through wholesalers in particular. And the idea is that they are focusing also into the multi-channel integration. So not only with Shopify, but also with giving us access to APIs and WordPress and so on and so forth. So that's an interesting play. Dropshipping is alive, simplifying e-commerce in general, and definitely a trend that it's still there and moving.
Yeah, good point. Interesting idea. Brave idea with the current market conditions. I mean, there are fewer IPOs this year so far than in the last couple of years. Of course, but market conditions are not great. Even though if you look at the statistics of the Euronext exchange ecosystem, it looks like things are moving in a way. And the smaller markets where I believe Yakkyo could actually perform an IPO are still quite active. So smaller, the junior stock exchange is still very, very, very active in Italy. And Yakkyo comes from the L Venture acceleration. So they've been through at least the very first steps in startup launching and startup funding, and then they became profitable, and they managed to grow organically. So
interesting.
Good history from them, and the IPO could be a good way to get to liquidity, to get to maturity for the company. So
yeah,
nice plan.
Awesome. All right, let's end this with by talking about golden power in Italy. So just to give some context, so there has been a lot of discussion about the use of golden power in Italy, and for the people that don't know, the golden power is simply the provision that the government can use to veto an investor on specific investments if there is like a substantial matter of national security in general. So the government basically can intervene. There are a few elements to consider. So basically, the ownership of the new investor post-money need to surpass 10% and have a minimum of 1 million in investments, or there is an ownership between 15 and 50%. So whenever either of those two conditions apply, then basically the government has 45 days to actually raise their hand, stop the investment, or intervene in some sort of ways. A lot of discussion here. What is interesting is that just as a reference, the last one of the latest application of the Golden Power was in June 2023 with Pirelli. So Pirelli essentially has a few Chinese investors, and basically the government enacted the Golden Power on the China National Tire and Rubber Corporation Ltd investment on the basis that actually basically what Pirelli is developing is a sensor applied to tire that essentially tracks data, routes, status of the infrastructure, and that's considered, of course, like a matter of national security if this kind of cloud data can fall in the wrong hands. So that's an interesting provision. Definitely useful for bigger M&A transaction, but the real question is how does it apply in the startup ecosystem? So that's a big question. Few different opinions. People are sort of suggesting to raise the percentage from 10 to 25%, like it happens in France, and some other people suggesting actually that the 45 days time frame is long and startup can suffer. So, what is your take on that, Nick?
Well, I don't have a strong opinion about it. It's probably true that the rules are quite strict currently and are fought a lot for assets such as Pirelli and other strategic companies that the government knows that's strategic and they really want, and they really want to be able to control even small stakes movements. Because probably they really know the way governance work in those companies. But of course, since they can't name them, the rule goes all out and can be applied to everybody. And of course, it can be cumbersome for companies that are not exactly, strictly speaking, so much strategic, but they could be open to international investments, and they could make it difficult for investors to fake companies to find new investors or acquirers. I totally see the problem on the investor side, because you invested, you want to get to liquidity, you have a good deal on the table, and you need to be uncertain on whether the deal will be actually completed, and that's a problem. And I totally see that. So I kind of agree that the rules should be better thought out, better adaptable to the startup ecosystem. I think we haven't seen cases where these rules have been applied yet, because there are not so many startups that have grown to a scale where it is significant. It is important to take a look at what might be the result of a foreign investment or acquisition. But
it feels like a premature discussion. But if we look into that, actually, it's preemptive in a way. I agree with you. Maybe not relevant case have been happening in the ecosystem. Again, we're a small ecosystem. We have we put a lot of effort, but we're still
but again, let's play the hypothetical. Not to name names, but let's play the hypothetical case. We talked about it before. Let's pick a company with some potential in the country. Let's say an energy dome. Or something similar to energy dome. So energy storage. You deploy energy storage all across Italy, and it becomes very important to our grid. And then someone comes and say, "Hey, I love that company," and it's a foreign country with ruling and ways of operating that can be potentially in contrast with the expectations of the Italian energy grid. I can totally see in that case the government moving and say, "Wait a minute, let me take a look at what's going on here." But as you said, it's a bit premature, so because we don't have so many startups actually in that position, in that phase. But it's better to talk about it now, that's for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So that concludes the week episode of the Week in Italian Startup. We hope you found this update insightful. So thank you for joining us today, and until next time. See you, Nick.
Ciao, Jack. Thank you very much. Have a great week. Take care. See you soon.